Well, at the present time there is 5 people confirmed dead from the Workers' Club and another 3 confirmed from out in the Hamilton area when the quake occurred there yesterday morning.
That tally is different to last night?
Yeah, the tally last night, or later last night, went to 9, but that was because of a person who came into the hospital, which they assumed had come from the scene down to the Workers' Club, but it wasn't. It was a person who'd had a heart attack.
What's the police strength at the moment, and just how are you directing them?
Well, we've got most of our police working here in the inner city. On shifts, they're working 12-hour shifts, and we have 150 Army personnel here with another 100 coming in.
What advice are you giving to people in the Newcastle area?
Well, what we're looking to do is to get people who own the buildings, the people who are or leasing the buildings, to have a look at their buildings to see what the damage is. We've got engineers, structural engineers in town from the Public Works Department, and they are now looking at those buildings and the buildings right throughout the town to see which buildings are safe and which aren't, and which buildings will which will have to be demolished.
What's happening about the roads at this stage? Will there be improved access?
Well, today we want to keep the general public out so that the engineers and all the other personnel can get about and have a look at what the damage is. It's dangerous. There are buildings that could fall down, and we don't want the public to be placing themselves in danger by being there.
What about last night? Were there any problems, any incidents of looting?
No, there's been no incidents of looting. There was one reported as looting, but that was just 2 thieves that broke into a shop over at Mayfield, and they were arrested. They triggered an alarm.
Very dangerous, extremely dangerous. There's a large slab perched above where everybody's searching, and taking it very cautiously.
What sort of spaces were you crawling into? How big?
Body size, very tight.
What are the chances of anybody surviving down there?
I couldn't say. There are some spaces that are big enough to go into. I went into one underneath the safe door, next to some poker machines, and it's a reasonable space. Could have fitted 2 or 3 people in it, but there was nobody inside it.
Did you hear anything or see anything down there?
No, we asked for the machines to be quiet so we could hear anything or hear the concrete moving, but there was nothing.
How long were you down there for?
We were down there for half an hour.
Is there much chance that there'll be other holes that you'll be able to crawl into?
There may be other holes. The second team that's just gone in is looking at a passage that runs back underneath the slab for some distance.
Which you didn't go into?
No.
Didn't find it. What's the plan now?
Well, Tracy, since our last report, another car has been removed. It was an empty car, but there are still many vehicles down there. The difficulty is getting access to them still. One effort was to send in a caves rescue team. Captain Dave Rothery led that team in. Dave, was that a fairly dangerous operation?
It is fairly dangerous. There's a lot of loose debris hanging over the site that we were searching, threatening to fall in from the floors above.
What could you see?
There's a lot of large machinery there, poker machines and a safe door, some toilet cubicles, but the site is a scene of absolute devastation inside there.
How far could you go?
We go right to the back of the building, but the slabs have fallen on top of each other in there, and there is a fair A lot of...
Was there any sign of anybody down there?
No, there's no sign of anybody alive that we could find. Our job was to go into the small spaces in between the slabs and on the brick walls to see if there was anybody trapped in small spaces that we could locate.
Well, from your assessment, just how long is it going to take to get right through that part of the basement?
That will be dependent on the removal of some of the slabs that are lying in the basement at the moment from the 3 floors above.
Although obviously you didn't see anybody, do you feel there could still be people down there?
I couldn't say at this point of time, but we certainly didn't see any sign of life in there.
Thanks very much. Back to you, Tracy.
Well, I've only just arrived, but it's all going very well. I've spoken to the Chief Inspector here. He's very happy with the way things are progressing, and I expect to be equally satisfied.
What's your reaction to the fact that people have died in Australia in an earthquake?
Well, it's yet another disaster. I'm soaking up the punishment at the moment. It just seems to be one disaster in New South Wales after another, but this one is even more astonishing, I think, than the others. So I've come up just to have a look, to satisfy myself with what's going on, to try and see what can be done in disaster situations, to gather as much information as we can to see how these things affect people. I'm afraid there's not much we can do to prevent future happenings, though.
So you'll be the first coroner in Australia, at least, to be investigating deaths from an earthquake.
Well, that's unfortunately true, yeah.
The Newcastle State Emergency Service has dealt with 800 calls for assistance since the drama began. This morning, the SES has 16 teams on duty, with volunteers called in from Sydney to Nabiac. 44 volunteers who'd been on duty since the quake hit have been stood down for rest. One of the paramedics working this morning is David Rothery of the New South Wales Cave Rescue Squad.
There's a lot of loose debris hanging over the site that we were searching, threatening to fall in from the floors above.
What could you see?
There's a lot of large machinery there, poker machines and a safe door, some toilet cubicles, but the site is a scene of absolute devastation inside there.
How far could you go?
We go right to the back of the building, but the slabs have fallen on top of each other in there, and there is a fair...
Was there any sign of anybody down there?
No, there's no sign of anybody alive that we could find. Our job was to go into the small spaces in between the slabs and on the brick walls to see if there was anybody trapped in small spaces that we could locate.
The State Coroner, Kevin Waller, is in Newcastle and this morning inspected the remains of what was the Workers' Club in King Street.
Well, I've only just arrived, but it's all going very well. I've spoken to the Chief Inspector here. He's very happy with the way things are progressing, and I expect to be equally satisfied.
What's your reaction to the fact that people have died in Australia in an earthquake?
Well, it's yet another disaster. I'm soaking up the punishment at the moment. It just seems to be one disaster in New South Wales after another, but this one is even more astonishing, I think, than the others. So I've come up just to have a look, to satisfy myself with what's going on, to try and see what can be done in disaster situations, to gather as much information as we can to see how these things affect people. I'm afraid there's not much we can do to prevent future happenings, though.
So you'll be the first coroner in Australia, at least, to be investigating deaths from an earthquake.
Well, that's unfortunately true, yeah.
It is expected to be some days before operations are fully restored at the Newcastle Steelworks. The quake interrupted steelmaking for 4 hours during the power failure. The BHP's rolling mills were not affected because they were shut down for routine maintenance.
I've heard nothing but praise for the way ambulance officers and health officials, health professionals right through the hospital system have coped under exceptionally difficult circumstances.
Did they have any shortages of blood or equipment, that sort of stuff?
No, there were no shortages, and the other thing that should be recognised is that there is a lot of disaster planning that goes on for emergencies that hopefully will never arrive, but certainly in this case all of that disaster planning and practice paid off very well yesterday.
Have you any idea about the extent of the damage to the hospital here?
The extent of the damage is quite severe at Royal Newcastle Hospital. It means that there are some 200 plus beds permanently out of commission. It means that capacity will need to be developed at other hospitals in the Hunter area and is available right now. One fortunate thing I can say is that this is the time of year when hospital occupancy is at its very lowest. In other words, people don't want to come to hospital unless they absolutely have to over Christmas and New Year. So the numbers were down, and we'll be able to plan to bring those services online elsewhere in the Hunter region.
Are there other hospitals that have been damaged?
The Mater Hospital has also been damaged, and there is also damage to the yet-to-be commissioned John Hunter Hospital, which is a 500-bed teaching hospital to come online sometime in the next 12 to 18 months. I'll be discussing with the Chairman and Chief Executive Officer today just how quickly we can bring the new John Hunter Hospital online, but that's 500 beds and Newcastle's new teaching hospital, which is in the pipeline, but even that's sustained damage.
Mr Greiner and Health Minister Peter Collins arrived at Fletcher Park by helicopter late this morning. The pair were taken immediately to the Newcastle Police Station, where they were briefed on the extent of the disaster. The men then met with Hunter Area Health Board Chief Executive Owen James and were taken on an extensive tour of the Royal Newcastle Hospital, where they were shown the extent of structural damage to two of the hospital's wings. Afterwards, Mr Collins admitted both those wings are now set for demolition.
It means that the North Wing and the York Wing at Royal Newcastle Hospital will need to be demolished because at the moment they're unsafe for occupation. They would require such reconstruction as to virtually cost the same as building a new hospital anyway, and therefore it's very likely that when the structural engineer's advice is in, it will be for almost immediate demolition.
Afterwards, the pair were taken to the Newcastle Workers' Club, the scene of the worst devastation. In a brief press conference there, Mr Greiner said all efforts were being made to help the city back on its feet.
I'm told that they expect to have the Workers' Club situation resolved or stabilised, if you like, today, a matter of hours rather than days, which will mean that we'll have at least crystallised the full extent of the personal injury involved. The other things that are happening is that the Lord Mayor identified a problem with homeowners being concerned about the structural safety of their properties. The Institute of Engineers has been contacted and is arranging for a team of expert structural engineers to come to Newcastle today to assist the Public Works Department engineers and the local government engineers who are, of course, putting priority on analysing the situation of the various public buildings in terms of their safety and their capacity to be used. We'll also be contacting the Insurance Council today in order to ensure that by Tuesday we have a mechanism set up to deal with what will obviously be a significant number of concerns of private individuals and businesses about their insurance standing. There's no easy way to resolve that problem, but the government with the Insurance Council will endeavour to ensure that by the next business day there is a mechanism set up for resolving those problems. So I think the situation is as stable as could possibly be hoped for. Could clearly have been infinitely worse if the timing had been a little different, and I'm really just delighted with the spirit of the response, both the spirit of Newcastle and the spirit of the response of all the organisations that have been involved in dealing with the tragedy.
The earthquake shook every building at the college, setting off a fire in the science laboratories, tearing down walls and shattering windows. Out of the tragedy, a semblance of good fortune. Had the quake struck during the school year, hundreds could have been killed. Here, bricks and glass poured down in a morning tea area, normally filled with students. 50 staff normally sit in this courtyard at the time the quake struck. Engineers are inspecting the college today, with the rebuilding cost estimated at $10 million. Although it is still early days, the Tech is hopeful that the complete range of courses will continue next year.
Well, Tracy, engineers have gone ahead with their plan to demolish the eastern wall of the waterboard depot. 2 caterpillars moved in and slowly tore the wall to pieces. Now the rubble is being cleared away and they'll continue with the next stage of the operation, which is to lift the steel girders of the club roof so they can get down to another concrete slab and then to the vehicles trapped below that. We believe there are 5 cars trapped under that slab, and at this stage there are still 20 people unaccounted for. Back to you, Tracy.
Army officers from across the state have been flown in to close off city streets and man barricades along with trainee police officers as the business district remains unstable. Newcastle landmarks like this former optometrist building on the corner of Hunter and Pacific Street are crisscrossed with deep cracks and threatening to fall. In Watt Street, 50-metre high buildings are also threatening to topple down onto the streets. The quake shifted corners nearly a full brick width away from its binding mortar. Paul O'Callaghan, a solicitor with offices in Watt Street, says he was lucky to escape with only minor damage to his building.
Very old building, and we thought perhaps there would be a lot of damage done, but we're okay. The top walls seem to have moved on one side, but nothing but dust, we hope.
Other people throughout Hunter Street have suffered quite a bit of damage. What sort of things have you seen?
Well, I've seen the top of Athcourt building on 30 Watt Street. The top corner seems to have broken away. The Army were trying to knock it down, but they've decided it's too dangerous, so they've just left it. Bricks and stuff everywhere. It's incredible.
How long do you think this is probably going to take to repair, if ever?
Months. We don't know how long it's going to take the business community to sort of get back into town and do their ordinary job. It's incredible.
In dramatic irony, the QBE Insurance building in Bolton Street seemed to suffer the worst damage. Splinters of glass showered the pavement at the height of the quake, and staff members were lucky not to fall out through plate glass windows as they ran for cover. Today was to be one of the busiest shopping days of the year as bargain hunters scooped up end-of-year specials, but the streets are deserted. Shopping malls have become eerie, completely silent and empty. Mel Kirsting, owner of a health food shop in the Hunter Mall, says while his shop didn't suffer structural damage, the quake will still be costly.
Yes.
How long do you think it's going to take to get over it?
Well, I don't think it could take a good 12 months or more, I would say, because I think if some of the structural damage has been done, some of the buildings will have to be pulled down and rebuilt. It's just not safe enough for the people if we get aftershocks or another quake.
In King Street, one building swayed so much it dislodged up to 5 layers of bricks that now lay strewn over the footpath. A little further down the road, and staff were in moving everything out of the Hetherington Kingsbury Shipping Company offices. The western wall had clearly separated from the main body of the building overnight, and it was decided to risk moving around in the office to clear out expensive equipment and irreplaceable files. Brian Goddard from the shipping company says he has been contacted from ship captains and companies across the world concerned over the safety of the city.
Well, I have one here from a firm in Japan called Katanion, and they're very concerned about the considerable losses to our public facilities, and all their company are very anxious about the safety of the people in Newcastle. And I have a further one upstairs from Spain, expressing similar things.
Of course, there's ships off the port at the moment. They're also a little worried.
Yeah, that's right. I have a ship outside at the moment called the Leica, and he hasn't been able to get any information from the port at all, so he's very anxious, and hopefully we'll get him in tomorrow.
The Newcastle RSL Club 2 days ago, a proud freestanding historic building, was today a mere pile of rubble and broken pieces. Engineers and council officials have spent most of the day considering how to remove the debris without damaging surrounding buildings. The same concern is being expressed over the condition of the Great Northern Hotel that is leaning over the Tattersalls Club. Throughout the day, engineers have been taking measurements of the wall and are confident the hotel will have to be demolished to prevent it crushing the Tats Club. Across the road and the Customs House spire has shifted a massive 12 centimetres on its foundations. The wind vane atop the spire bears testimony to how violently the house shook, while the chimney now has extra drawing capacity. In Watt Street, and workers spent more than an hour dismantling a chimney that threatened to slide off the roof and onto the street. The dismantling was a slow process, as each brick had to be chiselled off by hand and dropped to the ground without causing more damage. Above the city and Fletcher Park became a makeshift helipad for the military and visiting politicians who needed to land close to the city due to a blanket air ban over the business district and Hamilton. The 139-year-old obelisk that for so long sat above the city has also sustained serious damage and has shifted nearly a complete brick width. State Emergency Service personnel have been hard at work since the quake hit, many working through without more than 2 hours rest at a time. Their control centre below Fort Scratchley has received over 1,000 calls for help. Service personnel, along with Army engineers, have been inspecting houses throughout the area for structural damage and helping people to evacuate with a minimum of fuss. Service personnel have also been working to try and encourage homeowners to use less water, because water reticulation functions have been affected by the quake and are not at full capacity. SES Coordinator Don Geddes says the last few hours have been hectic.
Extremely busy. As the day passes, there's more damage being found. Large buildings are moving on their foundations, and it appears that structural engineers may have to condemn some well-known sites in Newcastle.
What would happen then? Are we going to see immediate, probably, demolition of those buildings?
Well, to be safe, they would have to have demolition, or there would have to be major repairs carried out to meet the standards required by safety people.
Being so busy, have you called in for help from other areas?
We've got a lot of people helping. We've had Sydney SES people up. We've had people from the valley. We've had the Army helping. The Army was wonderful last night. They really worked hard, and so did the SES units from Sydney. Really worked hard for us.
What do you think the next 24 hours probably hold?
It's going to be a very busy time. People are going to start recognising more damage. More damage might become more pronounced, and as a result, people are going to start calling in. I think the best thing people can do, those who are not overly concerned with their damage, should start contacting their insurance companies and getting assessors to come out and have a look at it.